want to make sure that I leave time for questions and answers, because I have 4 or 5 things I know I want to cover, and cut some of the high points, but I think you all have questions. So first of all, thank you all for being so gracious to work with me on my schedule. Because one of the things I do, because I couldn't put it all in there, and that doesn't mean anything other than I'm busier now than I was when I worked, which is hard to say, but I'm one of the co-facilitators of a monthly discussion on race and justice. It's a national discussion, so I could have bumped that, but I really, didn't want to. So you all were so gracious, and I'm very happy to be here. Let me tell you this is interesting. This is the first time I have publicly talked to any group about what I'm going to talk to you about today, my experiences here. And I am so deeply disappointed that I don't have my book. And but hopefully, like anybody most of you all who are like my age, like I only recently learned how to scan a QR code, okay? So, but we have these young ladies that just spoke who I know could teach anybody. So I'm hoping you all will consider scanning the QR code, which will take you to my website, and you can register so that as soon as the book is available, I'm hoping it's available tonight, to be honest, because it's supposed to be, but it was supposed to be, well, I mean, it is actually done, but at least by tomorrow. But, I think you'll find that interesting. And next thing I want to ask you all is this. Do I have your permission to be as honest as I can be tonight?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That's going to be.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. I'll start by saying this. I was in Atlanta the other day, and my wife asked me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And she asked me that because I was in the bed more than I normally was. I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just stressed." And I said, "And I will be stressed till I get this book in my hand." And to be honest, it's interesting. I've been through 3 publishers, and I think that there's a lot here that sometimes I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and I believe in spiritual warfare. So there's a lot of spiritual warfare been going on in trying to keep me from getting this book out. I'll just be honest about that, because it was supposed to have been out months ago. I've been at all kind of major events and where it would have been important, and so this is my little part to move the needle. As she mentioned, I'm a journalist. That's my training, my background. I don't think she mentioned that before I came to work for the federal government, I was Joseph Lowery's communications director at the SCLC. Who knows who Joseph Lowery is? If you watched the first inauguration of Obama, he's a little guy that brought out in a wheelchair. He co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Dr. King. So that was my boss for 4 years, and those were the 4 most amazing years of my life, because voter registration, voter empowerment, motor voter buses we would take out, just all the things around redistricting and gerrymandering. That was a third of what we did, not to mention all the other areas around justice. So when my oldest son, who was, I think he was 17 at the time, all of a sudden he started having, he was having seizures, and we couldn't figure it out. And the SCLC is one of these small organizations, like a lot of others, who they would give you insurance, but not necessarily for the family. So family was uninsured, and women and children always need insurance, right? So I had to go get another job, leave the SCLC, and I was praying for a job that I could continue to do justice work. I continue to do things that would benefit the least of these. And so, fortunately, this white liberal, she was a nurse, but by training, so I work for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Our region is the 8 southeastern states, so that's Florida and Kentucky. How different are those, right? Florida, Kentucky, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. Okay, so so she said her office needed to more accurately reflect the people we served here in the southeastern states, right? And so went to work with her in 1998. So I worked the last 2 years of the Clinton administration, in the 4 years of Bush. I'm sorry, the 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Obama, and thank God the 4 years of Trump, and then the first 2 years of Biden. So, and as Sheila mentioned, you know, you have to be flexible. You have to. I mean, you're still who you are, but you got to carry out the mandate and the mission of those people. And I had people who were close to me. My own son actually was one of them, because he's very much a justice advocate. He said, you know, did you feel, you know, like a sellout while you were working there? And I said, no, I didn't. There were some things I did sometimes I didn't want to do. But for the most part, I was able to be true to who I was, but I felt like even inside the enemy's camp, you need to have some people there who are striving to do the right thing and can do the right thing most of the time. You just have to do it undercover, so to speak. So it was most interesting. I'll tell you this: you were talking about expanding Medicaid. So it was a really amazing thing. I have to tell you the truth, the first 2 years I was figuring out government, because again, I've been a journalist and a public affairs person, and government is very different from that. But by the time Bush came in, and because I've worked for for these 5 last presidents, I can make some comparisons, you can imagine. And I'll say there were some things that were I thought were good about the Bush administration, in the sense he had a program called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. He had another program that was very much focused on helping the families of the incarcerated. He had something called the Healthy Marriage Initiative that was really good in certain communities where marriages weren't as common for one reason or another. So most of the administrations, even the ones that had the R's around their name, there were some good things that I felt like that happened there. Of course, like everybody, not everybody here, and most black folk in America, the election of the first black president was, and to be able to say that I was able to work for him was a phenomenal thing. So we had the opportunity to stand up the Affordable Care Act. So as was mentioned earlier, it was initially designed for all 50 states to be able to take advantage of it, to expand Medicaid. Of course, we work, 7 of our governors in this recalcitrant part of the country did not want to give health insurance to a lot of people. Yep. Certainly a lot of certain people, right? And so in my state and in this state and all the rest of them except for, and of course we know as mentioned, Mississippi just did it, North Carolina did it, and that was one of the jobs I had. I was the lead for our office in terms of being connected with those people who are working and championing the expansion of Medicaid. Anybody heard of an organization called Alabama Rise? Yeah. That's one of the organizations I work with, and so they have monthly meetings, and there are other people, but that's who I'd worked with, a guy named Jim Carnes, for years and years. But yeah, that was the design, to expand it for everybody. So the Georgia governor, Kent, is always bragging about he has this $5 billion surplus, because you have it because you're balancing the budget on the backs of poor, working poor, and usually black and brown people. But it's like that throughout the South, and you know, most of these people swear they're Christians, and so it was tough to deal with that. Sometimes you bite your tongue and you just hope the blood doesn't come out of the corner of your mouth as you're doing what you have to do. But so we had to go into these states who refused to expand Medicaid and build coalitions and find out who the key people were and work with them. And I'll tell you some of the people in Alabama that we worked with. There's something called AIDS Alabama, and they're based I mean, they had offices several places. Certainly Alabama Rise, Jim Carnes would hold a weekly meeting, and what my job was to come in and bring the federal perspective and also to bring my colleagues who were in the weeds. We kind of had the 10,000 foot perspective, because as the regional director, my boss, he or she was managed for HHS in the 8 southeastern states. Now the CDC is one of our 13 agencies, but they're also the 800-pound gorilla, so we couldn't really tell them what to do, but they're one of the agencies, the FDA, CMS, you know, the Administration for Children and Families. All of these agencies reported, initially they reported to my boss when I first started, but by the time I left, they kind of reported through that person. You know, that was a transition over the years. So we went into these states and we worked with the federally qualified health centers. We worked with all of these other organizations, H. Alabama. There was another, I remember when Obama was elected, and there was this group, and it was mostly a white group from the University of Alabama, which shocked me, but they were, I think they were, it was called Alabamans for Obama. And so we, you know, worked with all the groups who wanted to work with us. Now I'll tell you this, the Alabama Federally Qualified Health Centers, some of the states, our relationships were really good with the head of the Federally Qualified Health Centers. Alabama wasn't necessarily one of those. I'll be honest, it just wasn't. And so I'll be honest, truly some of these federally qualified health centers, you did say I can be honest here right now. So some of them honestly didn't want people who looked like me, historically, to come to their, and people who looked like me didn't feel comfortable coming, because there's been a lot of medical mistreatment of people of color. You know that, right? So these are some of the realities of that kind of work. But to me, it was really, really exciting. I'll tell you a story about in Mississippi in the Affordable Care Act. Interesting. A guy over there named Dr. Michael Miner. He headed up, and he was through the church. It's called Oak Hill Ministries, and he had navigators all over the state. And what he told me a story about somebody that would come. This is a white person who would come, drove 3 counties over to sign up for the Affordable Care Act. It was interesting because sometimes people just don't know. But he said, I can't stand that Obamacare, but I really like this Affordable Care Act. You know, and sometimes, and you all know this, sometimes working poor white people vote against their own best interests, right? Because of, you know, just history and who we want to identify with. And so some of that is some of the things, the barriers I think we need to work at. And I'll say a few things you all probably won't like tonight. Let me say one of them right now. I'm one of those people. There were years, believe it or not, I voted Republican. And I did so, I think, some of the principles of the Republican Party are good, and if you all know this, well, not the MAGA group for sure, but you all know that before 1960, a lot of black people traditionally voted Republican. Yep. It was the party of Lincoln and all this other stuff. And I'll tell you this that you may not know, that one of the turning points, and this is when the historian, I get out interviewing the historian, right? So Dr. King in Atlanta, downtown the Atlanta student movement, they were protesting Rich's department store, because in Rich's, black people could, you get their card, their credit card, and you could go in and you could buy anything, buy the shirt, buy the blouse. This was everywhere, right? But you couldn't go in the dressing room and try it on. You had to hold it up and hope it fit when you took it home. And once you took it home, if they thought it touched your black body, you weren't bringing it back. You couldn't sit at the lunch counter, like K&G and Kresge's. I don't know what they have around here, but you couldn't sit at the lunch counter and order the hamburger, the hot dog. I mean, that's the way it was. That's the reality of life up until, and even in '64, when the Civil Rights Act of '64 passed. I mean, it still took a while, particularly in certain places. And I won't go into all that, but you know how that is. So they convinced Dr. King to come down and be part of the protest. Dr. King was arrested and taken to South Georgia to a pretty notorious prison down there, and he was pretty afraid of dogs and had a German Shepherd right in there with him, you know. And so his wife got on the phone, and it was Kennedy, when we never had a Catholic before as president, right, and Nixon, and called both of them. And the one that responded was Kennedy, and so Kennedy, you know, did some things, made some calls, and exerted some pressure. Again, he wasn't president yet, but and not that I think Kennedy is a great person, and that's a whole other story. But he had his issues too. But they got him out, and this was just weeks before the election. So word spread through the black pulpits across the country, and then Kennedy was elected at that time in the closest election, presidential election in U.S. history. And that started the movement towards Democrats. Now we know we have all the Dixiecrats here in the South, right? Yeah. So I won't even go into all that. But so anyway, so we would go into these states, and all but only one. I had a great respect for Kentucky, because when the ACA passed, the Affordable Care Act passed in 2010, the only one that said, of our 8 states, and we have the biggest region in the country, yep. And you all know this, the poorest, the one with the most illiteracy, all of the isms, all of the diseases, right? High blood pressure, heart disease, you know, on, and diabetes, all these things. And also, and you all know this, and I can say this because you all told me I can be honest, this is the region with the deepest vestiges of slavery, yep. And the remnants of slavery, Jim Crow, all that is still here, deeper here, because yep. Again, and you can tell it by the fact that these governors simply will not do the right thing for yep. The people who this economy would collapse if you didn't have a working poor, yeah. Right? My own son, when I was mentioning they had the seizures, it took me to the federal government. I mean, he works 7 days a week, and I know a lot of people who work these 2 jobs because that's what they have to do. Because we know the price of housing, who could afford one? And he still lives at home, which we're happy, you know. And sometimes he was just, yeah, I'm still in mom and daddy's house. I said, well, be thankful, because a whole lot of people don't have a mom and daddy's house that they can be in. So praise God that, you know. So anyway, Kentucky was the only one. They said, look, we know we need it. We expanded Medicaid. And they had a Democratic governor. I guess it's the father of the one that's the governor now. You know what I'm talking about. I can't remember his name. Yeah, Bashir. Andy Bashir, his dad. And so, so they resisted. And not only did they did everything they could to keep us from setting up what they call an FFM, a federally facilitated marketplace. But we were able to do it. Lots of stories, lots of barriers, and it was really hard for us because early on, and President Obama, who my proudest thing I have is this picture of he and our team, and I'll tell you why, because in a moment, but he was, new. He was really new because he had only been a senator a couple of years, right? So he's very, very cautious. So in the beginning, and the very day the marketplace, the health insurance marketplace opened up was the very day Congress shut down, okay? And you know what, what's his name, Mitch McConnell said? He said, it's my mission to make him a one-term president, right? And another guy, a congressman named Joe Wilson, the one that stood up and shouted, "You lie!" Remember? He also said, it's the politically correct thing to be against the black man in the White House. So, that was not an uncommon sentiment, and people were not afraid or ashamed to express it. So Obama was he was extra cautious because I gave this example as a media person who, been doing this for so many years. There's certain places I knew, even in the Deep South, even not black papers, and radio and TV news outlet, who were begging to have somebody come and tell the Democrat side of the story because they muzzled us so we couldn't tell all the good things, we couldn't promote the ACA for a while. It didn't take that long, and again, you know, that's part of him, you know, being new at that. Him and his health secretary, who I worked for. I worked for a regional director, 10 in the country, and they all reported to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And so we wanted to set these interviews up. In fact, one of my boss at the time had gone to Tampa, and there was this Latino paper, and she was waiting outside the office, and our boss at DC called and said, no, you can't go in and do the interview. But see what I'm saying, so all you had was this real vacuum. You didn't have anybody talking about all the good things about it. All you had was the Republicans tearing it down, saying why it wasn't good, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that all turned around and everything. But this is the thing that I'll say, and I got 4 or 5 of these points, and then we'll answer any questions. But we were able to meet him. Our team, and again, because you know, all the states that refused to expand here, we were able to coordinate, because we didn't enroll anybody, the enrollment to the federally qualified health centers, the navigators, and all these other groups like the NAACP, the Children's Defense Fund, and the fraternities and sororities like the Omegas back there. All these people who did work to help this, we were able to enroll, or our states and our colleagues and partners enrolled just under 24% of the people in the entire country that enrolled on the Obamacare, on the Affordable Care Act. So, you know, we were very proud. To me, it was an opportunity to continue. And we were supposed to meet Obama somewhere in Florida, and a hurricane came, ironically. Then I was with my wife at our denominational for this region's marriage retreat, and we got the call, and they told me we may get this one other time, because it was October. He's about to leave office. He said, this will be our last time. So when they called and said we're going to be able to meet him in South Florida, so I went into that thing. I said, please, baby, please, please. And she said, go. So it was. So you know, that's one of the things I'm so excited about, the fact that to be part. You know, I mean, it's a humbling thing to be put in that place, because I could have never thought that would happen, you know, years ago. Nor would I have ever thought that I would, you know, be working for Dr. King's organization and the person who gave the benediction at his first inauguration. All these things kind of happened, and so it's just, you know, doing the right thing. But during the Trump administration, I guess I should go to the Trump administration now. During the Trump administration, because he was, should I do this in order? Let me see. Well, first of all, let me start with COVID. He was absolutely a COVID denier. At the time in our history where we needed a Churchill, right? Anybody know who Churchill is? I know all the people my age and over know who Churchill is, right? Churchill said, we'll fight him in the streets. We'll fight him in the, you know, he said, and we're going to be, this is going to be hell. This is going to be the roughest thing we've ever experienced, and we're going to have to give everything we have to keep our independence as the Nazis are rolling through Europe. I mean, he told the truth, right? I think if you tell people the truth, you're honest with them, they can deal with it, because we come together and do the right thing. But he couldn't do that, right? It's just going to disappear, you know, inject yourself with fluoride. Yeah, or, you know, so he cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Oh, yeah, because if you gave him the first 6 letters of it, he could not spell statesman, right? Right. There's nothing, because it's all about him. Yeah. That's who he was, right? He was the most, I mean, and just on and on. And then the 2 people that I know that were honest in his administration about COVID and did their best to warn us, one was Anthony Fauci. Yeah. Maybe you all remember him. and the other I called the lone black stranger, and that was Dr. Jerome. He was the Surgeon General right now. I'm forgetting his name. I'm getting these things as I get older. You all know what I'm talking about. He's the Surgeon General.
Yeah.
And he came to HHS along with the CMS administrator who, you know, she was right there with Trump. They were out of Indiana. I can't remember his last name, but he said, I remember when he said, if the U.S. doesn't, if we don't do better, if we don't get these people vaccinated and tested, you remember the first country, of course it was China, and then it was Italy. Do you all remember when Italy started reporting 1,000 deaths a day? And he said, if we don't get our act together, we're going to be like Italy on steroids. And then it happened, you know. And Trump, till the very end, now I didn't want him to die when he got COVID, but I did want him to get really, really sick and have a come to Jesus meeting. But a come to Jesus meeting wouldn't have helped with Donald Trump. And you know why? Because he said he's never found any reason to ask for forgiveness, right? And I give you a classic example. Anybody know, and now they call themselves the Exonerated Five. Did anybody remember the Central Park Five?
Yeah.
So even after somebody confessed that they had done that terrible deed in Central Park, he still said those 5 teenagers needed to be executed.
He still says it.
He still says it.
Yeah.
He's still, because he's never been wrong about anything, right? And he was the most divisive president, certainly in my lifetime. I'm 69 years old, right? So yeah. So what? Whether you were let's see. Let me find the list, okay? Because it was everybody, right? It was the Asian flu. Latinos were rapists and thieves. You know, it was the immigrants were terrible people. We know now, right? He's got them eating cats and dogs up in that city, right? Women, and women are going to win this election. But we got to bring some of our hard-headed men along with us, right? Our sons, our husbands, our nephews, our brothers. We may have to shape some sense into them because we need some of them. But women are the ones we can count on, the backbone of this party. And so, I mean, what does he call strong women? He calls strong women nasty, right? From Gretchen Whitmer to the Squad, to black reporters, everybody, you know. And what do we need more of? We need more immigrants from the Nordic countries like Sweden and Norway.
You know, the guy that beat up Nancy Pelosi's husband was an illegal immigrant from Canada.
Thank you. That's right. Well, but that's a great factoid. I did not know that. So yeah, I mean, and look, if we highlighted all of the natural-born U.S. citizens that did heinous things, right? You know, the reality of it is, but those are perfect targets. I mean, he's extremely deceitful, but also masterful politician that we've had, you know, and now I always talk about the fact that the emperor had no clothes, right? Because now the thing is, while they were able to demonize Biden, who I think, you know, is actually one of the most consequential presidents we've ever had, and so many things. One of the things that he did, and I mean, he's an old guy, and I wish he wasn't as old. It's funny, I was listening to him last night. He says, you know, it's hard for me to believe I'm 82 years old. I think that's how old he is. But now you have the foil of this young, vibrant prosecutor against this older guy who gets everything mixed up. And so now, finally, for the first time, he's being scrutinized in that same lens. So every morning, and I tend to be, I'm a late night person. I'm not a morning person, you know, just by nature. And I usually tend to go to bed at 2 or 2:30. But every morning during the Trump administration, when things got crazy, and that didn't take long, I would subconsciously or unconsciously wake up and reach over groping and grabbed my phone and looked. What do you think I was looking for? Anybody have a guess? What has he tweeted out late at night that I'm going to have to react to the next day? And so it was really, that's why these truly were the longest 4 years of my life. You know, he says it's about the economy, right? All these people who don't have a clue of what he did, because he inherited one of the most robust economies in U.S. history. He didn't do a doggone thing. I started to say something I shouldn't say. But the Wharton School of Business, where he allegedly graduated from, since I'm just going to be, you all are letting me be honest here. So I'm kind of getting it out. Again, this is the first time I've spoken. And it said that they said they looked at Trump's proposed economic plan and Kamala's plan, and they said that his plan would cost $5.8 trillion to the U.S. over 10 years, while hers was going to cost $1.2 trillion. So, what the hell is this about? He's so good with the economy. I mean, he and his billionaire buddies, right? That's what's going to benefit. We know that. Historically, he's telling you these things. In addition to he's going to be a dictator on day one. When they asked him about child care, you all remember that? Yeah. He couldn't explain what it was. He doesn't even know what it is. Harris and Biden, on the other hand, reduced child poverty 46%. And especially during the pandemic. I go to church in this area of Atlanta. It's called the Bluff. And it's an area it was ravaged by heroin. It's an area where people, this is interesting. I don't know if this happens anymore, but white kids would drive in from rural places to come and get fentanyl there. And several times, in fact, one day just before the Surgeon General came to Atlanta, one day 4 people had overdosed that night before, and one of them was a member of our church. So it's a really notorious area, but it's changing really quickly because it's like less than a mile from the Georgia Dome. We're on the street 3 blocks this way. When you cross over, you know, a lot of cities, big cities have this divide, right? When you cross over this one street, that's the next street up, Coca-Cola World Headquarters is 3 blocks down there, and a block from them is Georgia Tech. And on the other side, maybe about another mile and a half, is the Atlanta University Center, which some people know is the largest consortium of black higher education in the world. So we're surrounded by this, but yet this is a food desert. And so now, of course, people are gobbling it up because it's all right downtown. But, you know, it's one of those areas that is really, you know, a challenge area. And so childcare, this was my point. So a lot of the kids in that little community, we didn't have school. The school had closed down. Gladys Knight is one of the people that grew up in that, right there in that community. It's also about a mile and a half from the home where Dr. King, I'm not talking about on Auburn Avenue where he's born, but where he lived until he was assassinated. A little town, a street called Sunset. But all these kids, this little after-school program that we have in our little struggling church is when they would come, a lot of times it was the only real solid meal that these kids would get, because afterwards, and we had supporters, a lot of white wealthy supporters who came and provided meals for this community. So child hunger is a serious thing, because if you are hungry, you're not going to perform in school, you're going to act up, you know, you're going to have all these mental you know, these emotional issues that go with that. And so, you know, the fact that, and we know who doesn't give them about child hunger or anything else, right? That's the reality of it. So, talk about COVID. Immigration was a really tough thing for us. We had the only all-black office of the 10 regions in the country. So they actually sent a spy down to our office to keep us under. I'm not even kidding about that. Who stayed with us, and but it was really heartbreaking for us because one of the things that we were told to do was when they were setting up these UAC centers, unaccompanied children. These were the children separated from their parents at the border. Now I want to acknowledge we have issues in terms of our borders and immigration and how things are done. I mean, there's work to be done there, certainly, but to me the issue was the inhumanity of the way we did things, right? You know, and so, you know, like recently Governor Abbott, you know, he put up those balls with the barbed wire in the middle of the Rio Grande, and people would get caught on them and drown because they couldn't extricate themselves. And I remember one day in particular when this father, a lot of these people probably couldn't swim that well. His father washed up on the shore, and his baby daughter was tucked in his shirt. And to me, I couldn't help but seeing me in my community and other people, you know, who are marginalized. These people are coming here for a better life. Now, you can question how they come or what, you know, the process and not falling and, you know, all that, but it was just really difficult. And then one of the assignments we got was to call around. For example, they wanted us to find a place within 60 miles of Atlanta. So these are going to be these conservative, you know, counties and cities who was willing to set up one of these centers and house these unaccompanied children. You know, a lot of them, they had them sleeping under those almost like cellophane blankets. You know the blankets I'm talking about, right? The silver.
And Mylar.
Yeah. So, I mean, those were all, and so every day, you know, I mean, he's castigating this group and that group. Another thing, and I'm down to maybe about one more area. One of the areas that he talked about, his divisiveness and demonization of the other is something, I know that probably some of this happened, I'm sure it did, you know, but you have to go back at least to the 60s and maybe before the 60s to somebody that was just, for example, the Justice Marches, okay? Now the Justice Marches, and I think most of you will agree with me, it had nothing to do with the flag, it had nothing to do with the national anthem. It was about over-policing of black men in particular, but, you know, he made it be about that because it was a convenient scapegoat, and it was something that people who, you know, one of the beautiful things about, I think, us becoming, for the most part, and I don't know how much it's like that, to be honest with you. I'm in metro areas. I know in metro areas, if you live in the urban and suburban areas in particular, and a lot of other areas, you go to school, you're in band, you wrestle, you play football, you do all these things with people who are different from you. And what I'm saying, they look different from you. And the more we do that, we find out that really we all want the same thing, right? We want to live in peace, we want to earn a decent living, we want to get along, and we want to pass something on to our children. But some societies, if it's all black, if it's all white, you don't get a chance to know these other people, and so you don't see them as you see yourself, because you would not, some of these instances simply, honestly, would not happen to white people, because white policemen won't treat white people that way. And I don't mean all white policemen. I've had some great interactions with some white policemen, and I would never want to paint a broad brush, but a lot of people who go into the military these days, to the police, they come out of the military, and there's this warrior mentality that's in there. Anybody see the case of the lady who they came and the cop told her to take the water off the stove,
Yeah.
And he shot her in the head because he said, you know, I rebuke you and everything. You know, would that have happened to a white person? It would not, right? So, I mean, I know we're all on the same page. So, yeah, the American Rescue Plan, and we talked about child hunger, and that was about raising the amount per child during COVID from $2,000 to $3,600. You know, because a lot of these women who are single women, what is their choice, right? I go to work or I stay home and take care of my kids. Staying home and taking care of your kids, I mean, paying somebody to take care of kids is exceedingly expensive.
Yep. And
so that was something that kept so many families, you know, afloat. And so to go from 2,000 to 3,600 for people, children 6 to 17. And so it was refundable, and to the point it became no longer limited to a taxpayer's income tax liability. So even if you didn't file taxes, you could get this kind of help. Now we all know there are people who abuse the system, right? There are people who abuse the system. And there are always going to be people who show their brilliance by how good they are at gaming the system. It's like people who, these kids, 8 or 10 of them, will converge on this high-end store. They're in and out. They take tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff, and they're gone in 80 or 120 seconds. And we all know if they would use that genius for something productive, we have a much better world. But we don't also, because we know there are people like that, we don't want to harm and restrict the people who are doing everything they can and working hard and doing it right. So it has to be a balance there. So to me, it's clear, and I'm wrapping up, and then if there's any questions, we'll certainly talk about it. So to me, this choice is so clear. It's crystal clear, right? You know, do we choose a former president who cares about little but himself? And he encouraged an insurrection. My God, I bet you all are like me. I'm sitting in the Sam Nunn Atlanta Federal Center in downtown Atlanta. It's the 3rd largest federal building in the world. So, you know, TV's usually on in the conference room because, again, I'm a news junkie. I can't help it. So we're watching this, and I'm going like this, I'm going like this. I've got to be having a nightmare. This is not happening in America, right? We see the first plane is crashed, and then the next plane into the towers. And so we know his role in that, right? You know, and he's promised to take the nation back decades with the draconian Project 2025. And he's told us he'll be a dictator on day one.
Yep.
And he picked these ultra-conservative judges that took away a woman's right to choose. And now women in 40% of the states have to leave their states to get an abortion, or they do these dangerous back alley deals that just put people at risk. In fact, the last thing you all have heard about, and in Georgia, and I think Georgia just because, you know, you have Emory and you have the CDC, so you have these mechanisms and these organizations that really track this. And so after 2 years, they have found these 2 women who clearly they lost their lives because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And one of the things I was able to do, interestingly enough, the very last trip I took to HHS, and I was showing my new boss around. He's new. So he's a brother, by the way, 34 years old, Cornell graduate. So this is all new to him. He used to be the district director for Lucy McBath before. And so we went to Jackson, Mississippi, and guess who we ran into at the airport? But Benny Thompson, chair of the January 6th committee. So, you know, I mean, I couldn't have made this stuff up, right? Then we stayed there a couple days, and I got chewed out at his office one time. It wasn't for me, but it was for what he felt like our office wasn't doing. And that's part of the job. We talk about district directors. That's part of the job, Shirley, right? So then we went to Tallahassee, and believe it or not, who I was in the meeting with, and this wasn't about his wild conspiracy theories. You know what I'm talking about. What's the guy? The Surgeon General of Florida. He's African. His name is African, but you all know what I'm talking about. They hired him off this conspiracy theorist, and fired the person because they wanted to report the true COVID numbers down there. So again, it's just you couldn't make this stuff up. So you have Donald Trump, and because I couldn't forget that, and the opposition. Of course, he cost hundreds of thousands of people's lives because he insisted the disease would just disappear, pick the ultra-conservative judges, and put women at risk. And so, or instead, do we make history for the first time in the 250 years of our nation and elect a woman whose parents were immigrant, who is one of the most prepared persons ever to run for president, state attorney general, senator, kind of on and on. And in my opinion, is the epitome of the American dream. You came, you worked hard. She worked at McDonald's, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Did Donald Trump ever work anywhere?
No.
I mean, so the choice is so clear. And so much of that really is changing the hearts and minds of men. Because I know women are going to do what women are going to do, which is what needs to happen. But I for one, would love to see some of the more compassion that a woman would bring to that office. And guess what? We got to find out, right? And so some of the people, we have to let go of our old traditions and mindset and break the mold and do that. So I thank you all. Two other things I want to say. Our young people could help anybody in here who doesn't know how to take a picture of a QR code. And again, I didn't. And I hope you all will take a picture of my QR code. The book that you came to hear about is going to be orderable by tomorrow. I was hoping it was going to be orderable by the time I left here, but I don't think I've gotten that message, but I know that it's working through the system. And the one that many of you all have bought, and the others who I'll tell you is because of my time at the SCLC, it's profiles of 20 people, profiles of courage of 20 of them. I call them the unsung heroes and sheroes that were very instrumental in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of '64, the Voting Rights Act of '65. 5 of the 20 are from Alabama. One is the person who recruited Dr. King to come to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Now, how would life have been different had he not met Rosa Parks, led them, the Montgomery bus boycott, et cetera, et cetera. Another is a lady named Lula Williams who went to Kilby Prison because she helped get kids out of school to go join the marches. And that was the way you got parents involved, because black parents, a lot of them were involved, but a lot of them were very afraid to be, because you can get fired, your daughter could end up in the lake, in the river. There's all kind of consequences, right? And she was also the person that fielded the phone call April 4th, 1968, during overnight switchboard duty, that Dr. King had been shot and killed. So a lot of people who, did amazing things. And the reason I did this will be the very last thing I'll tell you, is because, again, I could never have dreamed that God would have used me in some of the ways and put me in some of the places that he had. This is what Dr. King said that prompted me to write this book. In addition to the fact that everywhere I went with him, running around the country and all these things, in Florida, protesting the treatment of the mushroom pickers, but all over doing all kinds of things. And I kept meeting these people. Most of them were 70 and 80. Had no health insurance, no life insurance, no 401k, no kind of pension, because they had spent most of the years and weren't educated, weren't highly educated, spent most of their years on the picket line, marching, getting spat upon, beaten up, serving food, doing things to help move our society forward. They knew they would not be the beneficiaries of this. They were doing it for their children and their children's children. Right? So Dr. King said this when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. He said, "I accept the Nobel Peace Prize at a moment when 22 million Negroes," which is what the proper people called us in, right, of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. He said, "I accept this award on behalf of the civil rights movement, which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger in order to establish a reign of freedom and a role of justice. From the depths of my heart," and this is why people love Dr. King to this extent, "from the depths of my heart, I am aware that this prize is much more than an honor to me personally. Every time I take flight, I am always mindful of the many people who make a successful journey possible. The known pilots and the unknown ground crew." And they call themselves, these people, the unknown ground crew. He said, "You honor the ground crew without whose labor and sacrifices the jet flights to freedom could never have left the earth. Most of these people will never make the headlines, and their names will not appear in Who's Who. Yet the years have rolled past, and when the blazing light of truth is focused on this marvelous age in which we live, men and women will know, and children will be taught, that we have a finer land, a better people, a more noble civilization, because these humble children of God were willing to suffer for righteousness' sake." So because they did all they could do, I was able to go to any college I had the grades to get into, right? And so I was prepared to help them tell the story that they could not tell, because our history historically has been oral history. So I count it such a privilege and a joy every time I get to sit down with some of these people. And so that's one of my contributions in addition to this. And the last thing I say, and this I honestly will be last thing. So I couldn't put any of my people's name in this book, you know, because there's a bunch of crazies out here. That's why I was thankful for you locking the door. But you know, I would be disingenuous. I would not be faithful to all these people that I work with and model sacrifice to me if I wasn't willing to step out to try and make a difference. And that's what I have done. I thank you so much.